Okay, all right. So this is where we were. So we have seen that there are two ways, important ways of just a minute. Yeah, two ways of IPC. First is shared memory, and second is message passing. Okay, in the last class we have seen some aspects of message passing. We studied the concept. Okay, and then we will study shared memory in the next class. So today we'll continue to focus on message passing. Okay, and note that we are not going to get into great details of level of programming. Okay, I will surely give you a few more coding assignments wherein you will use these system calls for shared memory shared memory, and as well as example on message passing. Okay, this nice diagram. Process A wants to communicate with process B, and they have private address space, and they can't do it without making use of operating system. So they send a message to operating system, or make a system call in some sense to operating system, and operating system in turn passes the message to another process, right? So that's the method generally used. Okay, so address space is independent, but kernel has access to all the memory. Okay, this point. And kernel copies data first from address space into some kernel internal buffers using write system call. Okay, and then kernel copies data from kernel buffer to address space of another process that is caused by read system call. So write system call is suppose process P1 is trying to write sending a message to P2, then P1 makes a system call, and then as a result of that, message is copied into kernel buffer, and from there, if other process does read, then from that buffer it goes to the other process. This is in general the concept. Now the primitives that are provided to you by POSIX library or system 5 library don't have, you won't see read and write explicitly, but it could be some version of in a higher level primitive based on this read and write, right? So this is this diagram shows kind of communication we have, and then we for next 10-15 minutes we'll study message queues. Okay, and then for rest of the lecture we'll study FIFO and pipe. Pipe mainly, and FIFO will leave it to you to study. Note that there is a difference here. You can see the on top there is a byte stream. You can see this, right? The one sorry, the one above is a byte stream. It means that pipes and FIFOs and also stream socket, which will not study now. The message is sorry, the we will not use word message. The data is sent as stream of bytes. Okay, so it's not structured, the information or data is not structured in message. Now when this data that is to transfer is structured in the message, then we'll use this mechanism called system file message queue or POSIX message queues. Okay, now message is always structured, right? Like the IP message that you studied, right? There is always a metadata area or control area or header area, and then the data area, right? Okay, so obviously message is fixed, kind of fixed data structure. So its the size is known, then whether it's fixed size, variable size, who is the sender, and all other properties are there, and who will be the receiver and so on, right? While byte stream is just nothing, a sequence of bytes, that's it. Just like water coming from other one end to another end, whatever you put one end will come at other end, right? So these are also very important. Byte streams are also we use very often. Okay, so we'll look at both, and then possibly next week we'll look at shared memory, because see, shared memory and some of the other mechanisms require synchronization primitive. Okay, so it means that if two processes are trying to write into shared memory, then only one should be given access. So we'll get into more discussion about concurrency management, that is synchronization, and then we will discuss in detail some of these mechanisms. Okay, all right. So in general, IPC mechanism, when a process A is trying to communicate with the process B, is through this mechanism that we have discussed just now. Okay, that process A cannot directly communicate with process B, and it has to copy the data into kernel space, and then from there it can be read by process B. Okay, this is in general the mechanism. Now it can be flavored in different ways to present to user. Okay, all right. So let's discuss in very brief about message queues, and note that the content of this is not usually available in the books. So I try to read it from 4 or 5 books, but it's not there. So it's available usually on the website, some websites, and also, if you read manual pages of Linux, then it's given in cryptic form, but actual explanation you will not find it many books. Maybe Unix, advanced Unix books you will get it. Okay, so it's as simple as that. You can see this diagram which I made is not so good. So I won't add arrows here, but nevertheless. So message queue is a queue of messages. It's actually a linked list. Okay. So what we are showing here is a queue that is associated with a process, say P. So P requests OS to create a message queue for it. Okay, and this message queue, of course, so process of course can request to create multiple message queues. It means that now each message queue will have a unique identifier. Okay, and this identifier is a system-wide unique. So it means that now any process who knows that message queue number can receive message from this queue. Simple. All right. So this is the process that has this message queue. So you can have, and so it can write data into this one message queue, and there will be arrow here. Of course, I don't have pen, so I thought I will add arrow here, but note that at here there is arrow. Okay, and these processes Q, R, S, and maybe more can read the data from this queue. All right. Okay. Now you may ask a lot of questions that what is the sequence, who will do that first. That's all there in the system calls that are available. Okay, so we'll not go into that level of details, how this will be done, whether it's blocked, unblocked. For example, there is a when process P sends a message in the queue, until it is received, it can be blocked. Okay, and so on. And similarly, S, if wants to read it from this queue, and there is no message available here, it's empty, then it may also get blocked. So there are various combinations are available. P, for example, if this message queue is full, may get blocked or may not get blocked. So these configuration parameters are there. Okay, and corresponding to these, we have studied in the last class what are the possibilities where sender and receiver can be blocked or unblocked. Okay, all right. So first, so there is, now note that when a process wants to communicate to other process, both process need to know the QID. Okay, because it's system-wide unique. It means that both process P and say process Q should be able to generate QID, message QID. Otherwise, this is the first step in communication. All right, these are all cooperating processes. And right in the beginning, when you're writing program, you may not know what is the queue number because it has to be unique. You cannot statically code it, right? Okay, so these QIDs are generated by OS. However, it should be known to communicating process, otherwise they cannot communicate. If P only knows and Q, all these processes don't know, they cannot pull the messages, right? Because they have to specify where they're pulling it from. It means that all these processes should know the QID, and it means that they should be able to generate QID, and it should belong to something. Okay, so next thing is that key generation. First step is before QID is generated, a key is generated. Okay, and that uses ftalk function, okay, which is provided by systemv library. So it will have corresponding system call. So now here, in order to generate the key, first step is key generation. Something needs to be specified. Okay, this is the path name. Okay, path name of a file. So both processes which want to communicate need to know this path name. Okay, and then some project ID. Okay, which is few bits of the project ID. So now this, it means that this path name, whatever be the file, it could be any file. Okay, there's a ./user/Ravi, for example, and this could be project ID 5. The last few bits of that is taken, and this is taken, and from that a key is generated. Okay, it means that now both P and Q will generate the same key, and now we use this key along with flags. Okay, some flags which will tell what is to be done. It's only for reading, writing, execution, and many other parameters can be defined in that. And we use this system called MSG get system call. Okay, and it will get the message queue identifier. So once you run this and this integer type, it will return message queue ID. Okay, all right. So now message queue, one of the flags, if you said, there are a lot of things that you can do with this system call. Okay, and then if this message flag is IPC create, then it will create a message queue also. Okay, let's focus only on that. Let's not get into others. And then other flag values. See, this is not a, this is an integer corresponding different flags, right? This is a, okay, so there may be multiple flags. So one flag is IPC create flag. When it's set, then queue is created. Then other flags could be corresponding read, write, execute, or whatever. So now when we execute this, then a message queue is created and its ID is provided. Okay, now when client runs this, it may not want to do this, right? It may not want to create a message queue. Its message queue already exists by user one. It will just get the message ID by setting appropriate parameters. Okay, any question up to this point? Are you able to understand it?
Sir, what does MSG return?
Okay, this will return the QID, message QID, message queue identifier. Okay, so basically first we created a key. Okay, now key alone is not sufficient. Along with the, because key is just unique number. So both user and client, P and other client process, let's assume, will generate the same key, and then from that, if the P will use this key along with parameters, what kind of message it wants to create. Okay, various parameters it can specify. And also when P specifies that the message phase of IPC create, then a message queue is created, and that queue ID of that, because we know that whether there's a message queue or pipe or anything, it will have unique ID, which all process must use for reading and writing. Okay, so now this return of this is QID. The queue that is created, that's ID is returned. Similarly, client process can run this, and then set appropriate parameters, then it will also get the QID. Now once both of them have QID, then they can communicate. Okay, and there is another system call which will not discuss, that for example, this message queue is to be deleted or modified, some parameters need to modify. Then P, for example, or the owner of the process can use this system call to change those parameters or to delete the queue. Okay, because once queue is created, it has to be deleted. So there must be some system call. So this system call is corresponding to that, and few other things one can do. Okay, now you can use, now the QID. Okay, when we send it, when the P which is communicating will use this QID, okay, that it has got in earlier process, and then the message it has, it will give a pointer to the message that is to be sent, and then other parameters, the message size, etc., and some flags. Usually this flag is 0, but it can also be used in special cases. Okay, once it specified the message ID, message QID, and the pointer to message, it can send the message. So now this message will go and get into the message queue. Okay, all right. Okay. Similarly, now the client, for example, the one here, for example, it will also generate the message QID, because it, these two are cooperating process, P and Q, and they know, Q knows what, what is the project ID, and also other parameters, right? That is path name and project ID. So from that it can also generate the message queue ID. Okay, so from that message queue ID, when it runs system call receive, okay, like here, it will get the message, and obviously it will have a pointer to buffer and message. Important thing, it has to specify the message queue ID and pointer to buffer. Okay, all right. So it means that any, okay, all right, and when work is over, the message queue can be deleted by the one who has created it. So let's look at a very simple example. Of course, I will not show here the code. You can look at the code. It's available at many places. So let's assume there is a server and multiple clients. A server has a message queue. Okay, it has to create a message queue, and it uses then ftalk function, okay, to create key, and from key it can create message queue ID. Okay. Okay, all right. So it means that now it's all known to even client process, the parameters that goes into ftalk function. So the client can also get the key, and the server also gets the key, and then server can create the message queue, and the client also knows the now key of the message queue using the function that we have discussed earlier, that is this a message queue identifier, msget function, msg get function. Okay, all right. Okay, now so now server messages can be read by client. How about client messages? Okay, client part is little simple. Client can okay, client can also do the same thing and create a message queue. Okay, and there is a way to communicate this to server. Okay, so client create their queue with some private key. There is another method to create their queue and embed their queue identifier in a request message to server. Okay, so okay, so now both client and server know each other's queue IDs. Okay, so now server has created this queue. Its queue ID is known to all. Each client creates a message queue, and this message queue ID is sent to server in some form. The one method could be the one similar to what we have used it for server, because if server and client know each other how to create QID, then server can also know about client's QID. Okay, another way is of course the one which is shown here, which using private thing, but embed their unique queue identifier in a request message. I don't know how request message will go, but let's assume that server comes to know about client's message queue ID. Now, once message queue ID is created with server and clients, and by simple reading and writing into message queue, writing and reading communication can happen. Okay. Any question?
Sir, can you please explain the diagram once again?
Okay. I will go through. Unfortunately, I don't have pen, but let me. Okay, this is the thing that we want to do. P wants to communicate with all these. Now, each one, P will create in its own message queue. Okay, let's say it's a one-way communication. The P will create own message queue, and then Q is uniquely identified by message queue identifier. Okay, and this identifier should be known to both P and Q, and P and R if these two are also communicating, and P and S. Okay, all right. There's a possibility that this process wants a message queue only for communication with a client, say Q only. But right now, let's assume that there are multiple clients of a message of a server that they will get message through this message queue. Okay, so first thing is that we create the key. Now we first thing is that this process wants to create this message queue and get its ID number. Now this is based on some parameter, okay, and that should be known to client, and which is, say for example, a project name and some directory name. Okay, now this with this directory name is unique, or sorry, not the directory name, path name within a directory. So path name is unique, and then other parameters, project ID, few bits will also be unique in some sense. Both these combined in some way or other. I don't know what is the method of generation of key, but key is generated, and that key is unique. Now based on the key is one of the parameters to generate QID, along with various, what kind of queue is to be created, that depends on what this request, whether it's messages in it will be only readable or writable or whatever. All the parameters it can specify along with key, and this key is generated and its number is available. So that's a simple process that we have seen. Okay, now coming here, server. So server creates a queue, and this queue ID is something which it will generate. Okay, so when server wants to send message to client, okay, any client, okay, of course message will have all this I mean, we are not getting into great details, but the message will contain information about a lot of things, like source, who is a source process number or server process number, client process number, and so on and so forth, right? So it will put the data into its own queue. From there, different clients can read. Okay, other way is that each client will have its own queue, here in this case, each client has own queue, and then and it means that client can now read from this queue. Okay, so there number of things are possible that since each server and each client has own queue, it can be used for writing and reading. Okay, so all right, so this is one way it can be used. So here in this example, we could have also used message queue for writing, and then other ways for reading. All right, so very simple lot of configurations are possible. Very simple configuration is about one-way communication where server will write and anybody who has a message queue ID can read it from there. This is another configuration wherein server can directly write into message queue of client and client can read it from there. Okay, all right. Okay. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
I have two questions.
Pawan?
Sir, one is that if we support generating QID, if we pass path to file and project ID,
Mm-hmm.
so sir, if every process, any process,
Mm-hmm.
the path is same, path and project ID, will the QID generate will be same all time?
So basically, if these two parameters are the same, okay, because client process also needs to know this, then there must be a key generation function which will generate the same key. It
And
has to be same, otherwise client process will generate different key. Okay, then communication is not possible. Right in the first instance, how client will know about process ID, sorry this message queue ID, how will it know?
sir, we can pass. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, because this is the first step, right? Otherwise once message passing is already there, then there's no need for all these things, right?
And sir, second, can we access message just by passing QID?
No, so it's not only that, it has to use an system call that we have not discussed, but it has the read write system calls are there.
Sir, yes, there is in MSG get.
Okay, yeah,
We are passing key.
yeah.
Key can anyone
No,
can.
this is to get queue identifier. Okay, and once queue ID is there, then it can be used inside. Okay, for sending and receiving, like this is MSG send. It has to specify queue ID and then the message that it wants to send.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, each queue, thing is this way, each queue has a number, and then if server process wants to send it there, then it will use that queue ID to send into that queue, and if a cooperating process which is queue wants to take it from there, will also specify queue ID in corresponding receive system call. Okay, so same queue ID is to be specified. So yeah.
Sir, it's for receiving. So sir, for receiving, what parameters do we need? Just like message QID and. So sir, we have to check that only that process can check their own QID. No other.
So so there are some other fields available which we have not discussed, right? So there is something called type field is there, and then each message also will have some parameters, right? It's not byte stream, right? Like IP message, right?
Okay, sir.
IP packet is received by, can be received by anybody, but it's like Ethernet packet also has a header, right? It goes to all nodes, but the one whose recipient will receive it. Now, so what we have discussed is very generic concepts, right? We have not gone into details. Now, if that is so, that message is to be received only by corresponding recipient, then this message queue can be created between these two processes, P and Q. Okay. Otherwise, I'm sure there must be some semantics who is a recipient. Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in the message send function,
Mm-hmm.
the MSQ ID is the ID of the message queue where we want to send the message, right?
Yes.
And what is MSQ ID in the receiver? I got
Same MSQ ID, because that will, or receiver will also generate. So go back here, when it executes this function, uh, okay, ms get with the key, it will get MSQ ID. So here whatever variable you define is MSQ ID. Okay, same thing, client will also execute, because it can generate the key and it will also get the same MSQ ID. So both client and they both will have QID of this, and then they can execute write and read function. Okay.
Okay, sir. But then in the receiver function,
Yeah.
the MSGP is the pointer to the buffer, right? So what is the need for that pointer? If we already have the message queue ID, then we can directly use that.
Okay, we are not going to get into details, but is a pointer where the message, you once you receive it, you have to write it somewhere, na?
Yes.
Okay, so some of those details, of course, we don't have to get into. Otherwise, you'll have to get into, some number of pages to understand it. Okay, so just think in this way, that when this is a linked list, then there is a message, there is a pointer. Okay, and then that pointer, when it's receiving it, it has to use that pointer to copy that information into some buffer, its own buffer. So there must be something, some pointers for these. Okay, so please don't get into syntax level details. You read the manual and you get it. All I want to tell you is the basic mechanism. Okay, because each system call, then we have to look at what these values are, where are they defined, and so on, right? So I'm not, we'll have to look at a struct parameter and what are the values in that. So we're not going to that level of detail.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, just understand the concept. Okay, so these are some of the system calls in POSIX library: MQ open, MQ close, MQ send, MQ receive, MQ unlink, set attributes, notify, etc. Okay, so what you have studied is just this very top level view, not really any details. Okay, so if you are interested more, please go through. I mean, plenty of things are available online. Okay, second thing, now let's, so now with this, we will not discuss any more message communication. Okay, possibly socket communication you would have already studied in your networking course, but if we get time, we will look at it. Now, next thing we study is pipe. And note that these are byte streams, right? So you would have already studied pipe in your shell programming. Pipe is one-way flow of data between processes. A process writes data to pipe, and recipient reads the data, right? So you can do this like program 1 output goes to program 2. Okay, so take everything from standard out of program 1. So standard out of program 1, whatever is there, maybe is a screen, standard output, okay, or terminal. And instead of that is data output going to terminal, it goes as an input to other program. Okay, so it's this way, right? So you can use in shell ls pipe with wc. Okay, so ls, output of ls, okay, directory, whatever the output, which is the list of files, go is not when you type ls, then you on your screen you see the output, right? Now that output, instead of going to a screen, goes to another process which is wc, and it runs that, it takes that input from ls and then gives it to a standard output. Okay, so it's something like this. So ls is running, its standard output is normally screen, which is corresponding to file descriptor 1. Now instead of it's going to screen, we map this standard output to input of this pipe. Okay, this is called write end of the pipe, and then output of that, which is read end of the pipe, goes to another process, which is word count. Okay, so standard input for this word count is now this output of pipe. Any question?
No, sir.
All right, simple. Okay, so it works in producer consumer fashion. Okay, so all right, so these things are very clear. Now note that pipes can be used only if the relationship between processes is there. There is some ancestry. Okay, two independent processes created by two different parents which are not related. A process in one client process and server process which are not related to each other, pipe cannot be used. Okay. And that's the reason this pipe kind of mechanism is used in a system. It cannot be used across. Okay. All right, so now let's look at details of this. So when we run a pipe system call, okay, it generates a pair of file descriptors. Okay, do you know file descriptor from your first level programming course?
Sir, you gave us in the assignment.
Okay, file descriptor.
Yeah.
Okay, which assignment was it? I forgot.
Sir, the one before that, the right one.
Okay, all right. Okay, so now okay, we'll go through it again. Okay, now the way pipe works is very unique. Okay, so it generates a pair of file. Pipe is considered as a file. Okay, it's not actually a pipe, but so let's view this as a file. But when we read a file, when we open a file, simple file, ordinary file, we get one file descriptor. Okay, which points it to a data structure which says what kind of file it is and where in the file the current position is, and all that information is there, right? So the file descriptor corresponding to pipe are two. Okay, one first file descriptor is corresponding to read operation. When we a process does read operation, then it will use this file descriptor. When a process wants to write into file, it will use different file descriptor. Okay, so instead of one file descriptor which is there in ordinary file, there are two file descriptors, right? Okay, so now here I explain about file descriptor in case you don't remember it correctly. Okay, file in general is a sequence of bytes. Any file can be treated as sequence of bytes. So now IO devices in general are represented as a file, okay, in a system. Okay, so even OS is considered as a file. It will be there in a file. So file is very important concept which we'll study later. We'll spend about 5-6 lectures on that. So basic operations can be done like open file. The moment it's open, it's brought into main memory. Okay, and then structure is part of the file can come to main memory, and some structure is set to describe that file. Okay, then close is the opposite process of that. Seek is that go into particular position in file, and then read and write is wherever the pointer is, read from there. Okay, because you can sequentially read the file. Okay, there are, as soon as you start any program, okay, any process, the 3 file descriptors are available all the time, which is standard input, which is like a keyboard, standard output, which is file descriptor 1 is terminal, and file descriptor 2, which is error output. Okay, all right. Okay, so now if when you do open any file whose path name is given and what kind of file it is, it will return a file descriptor. So in general, I'm telling you, when you open a file and give the file name or path name, it returns a file descriptor. Now all other operations, all other system calls that you want to do, note that all the system call can happen only after opening the file. It means that file descriptor has to come and then use this file descriptor to do other operations like reading or writing. Okay, okay, so when this is executed, okay, when this is executed, pipe system call is executed, we get 2 file descriptors, P0 and P1. Okay, which is usually value of 3 and 4. When you run this program where you are just opening a pipe with this is array, so we'll get 2 values of in the array. Read file descriptor is value is 3 and write file descriptor is value of 4. Okay, so process A wants to write to pipe, it will use the file descriptor 4. Okay, and when process B wants to read it from, it will use a file descriptor value of 3 or P0 and P1. So P0 will be 3 and P1 will be 5. Okay, all right. How much time do we have? Okay, another few minutes. Okay, now let's see how do we create from shell, because in shell you are running this thing, right? ls pipe more, okay, or ls pipe wc, any of these, right? Doesn't matter. Okay, so how do we do it? Okay, just a minute. Okay, so basically this is the first that's shown here. If you there is a user process, okay, and it does a fork, sorry, it does a pipe system call. It means now kernel creates a pipe here, okay, and then it gives 2 file descriptors fd0 and fd1 to the user process. Okay, now let's assume that the parent process or the first process does the fork, it will create a process exactly similar to itself, the process here, and the note when we studied fork, then we know that file descriptors remain the same. Okay, so now both process will have file descriptors open, which is fd0 and fd1, so on, right? Okay, now it means that when parent uses fd0, it can read it from the pipe. The direction is changed from earlier diagram, and when it uses file descriptor 1, fd1, then it can write into this pipe. Now what we can do is that now we can remove because when what we are doing a pipe, right, and it's between parent and child. So we can remove one fd1 here from parent and fd0 from child. Okay, so now whatever child writes using file descriptor 1, fd1 goes into the pipe here, and parent can read it through fd0, because when parent wants to read, it will use this file descriptor and can read it. Simple. Any question?
Sir, can you give us example where, sir, output of child node is a child process is needed by parent through this?
Anything, right? How do parent and child communicate?
Sir, I think like you told us the parent and child are like same copy of each other.
Yeah,
So
but
I
address space is different, but right?
address space is different because they are different process. But sir, if they are same process, then why the output of child will be needed by parent?
Oh, why do you say that they are same in the beginning?
Okay,
Because-
okay, sir. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
it
got
may run different program altogether, right? Because the child can create can run different program. I mean, using XXCV program, right? File descriptors still remain the same. Okay. All right. File descriptors still remain the same even if after execution of EXECV. All right. It may close it if it wants, but those file descriptors are deliberately remain there. Okay. So, and right now we are talking only about mechanism. We are not really looking at use case scenarios, right? So it says that by simple forking and use of file descriptors, okay, and the concept of pipe, a unidirectional communication can happen between parent and child. And let's look at now this example. How do you implement then ls and more? Okay, it's simple as this, right? First is that I will take just 2 more minutes. Okay. First is that this is the shell is running. Okay, it does a pipe system call and creates this structure, right? Okay, so pipe is created by kernel. It passes on to file descriptor 3 for reading. So shell can read it through this pipe and write it through FD. FD is equal to 4. When it uses write file descriptor 4 and something, it will come to pipe. All right. Okay, now shell can fork. It will create 2 children. So it will create this shell and the shell, and all the file descriptors are the same of the pipe. Is same, right? Basically FD4, all will have same file descriptor number. And now we can run exec syscall in corresponding to corresponding to what? Corresponding to ls and more. So before that, this shell will delete this. So shell deletes these 2 file descriptors. Now what is left out is these 2 processes, right? These 2 shell, the children of shell, original shell, and both will have file descriptor 4 for writing into pipe and 3 for reading into pipe from the pipe. Okay. Now what will they do? They will execute. The first one will execute ls command. Okay. Now ls has a file descriptor for as an output, right, which goes to terminal. Now it will change, somehow it has to change it to something that will go to the pipe. Okay, So now what it can do is that it will map this file descriptor as file descriptor 1. Okay, using there is a duplicate command. It will duplicate for this file descriptor 4 as 1. Okay, so copy file descriptor 4 into 1. Okay, all right. So now we have this thing, and the output of this pipe has to go to second command, right? So now we'll have to run something, and before that we can delete this. We don't need file descriptor 3, because output of this ls, it has nothing to do with pipe now, because we are doing simple ls pipe with more. So output of this, so it does not do any reading. So ls will not do any reading here, right? So it can remove this. Okay, all right. So whatever now ls is executing will go here. Okay, but before that, shell second process is to be converted into more. So now we use execv and convert this into more, and now it will do the same process as the here, change the file descriptor to 0. It means that because standard input for an this process is 0, so it will do the mapping of 4 to 0. So now output of this ls will go as a standard output to pipe, and the pipe output will go as standard input to the process more, and its a standard output will go to terminal. All right, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is the same thing described in different way, that it just shows the mapping of file descriptors here. Okay, all right. So now file descriptor 1, which is output of first process, goes to a pipe, and then file descriptor 0, or the second process, now is receives or reads it from pipe. So this is how it is implemented, right? All right, so we'll start from this point in the next class, and then we'll look at what the disadvantage of pipe, and then we'll briefly look at named file called FIFO. Okay, so this is where we are. Okay, all right, any question?
No, sir.
All right, thank you, bye bye.